Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit for Tuesday, August 29th, 2023. I am Jer, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. And, of course, one of the important things to know in this region, one of the things that holds us all together is sports. And when we talk sports, we talk to Fletcher Sharpe on sports, otherwise known as Fletcher Nostradamus. Fletcher Sharpe, good to talk to you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again.
We got a lot of stories to talk about. The Lions, their preseason is over. We need to look forward to the regular season. We want to talk a little bit about what's happening, just as we're recording this. Backup quarterback Nate Sudfeld tore his ACL. He's going to miss the 2023 season. I feel like that just gives the job to Terry Bridgewater, the backup job at this point. And of course, there's cuts and everything else. Plus, we're going to talk Detroit City FC. There's some shifts in the front office. Trevor James is moving up to an executive role. We're going to talk to you all why we didn't have an emergency pod, even though we got like 50 messages about it. And we're going to get into that win against Birmingham, which, Fletcher Sharpe, I'm going to take the W.
You're trying to make the playoffs. Any W is all that counts, even if it's one of the ugliest ones of the year.
Now, you were texting me over the weekend. You were seeing a documentary before we get into all the super local stuff that you're like, you got to see it. So tell me about it. Tell me and the people about it.
I'm sure a lot of people have probably watched it or even teased at it or listened to it or even just seen the original part. It's called BS High. It's about Bishop Sycamore, which for all intents and purposes is a fake school. Actually, not even all intents and purposes. It is a fake school, period. Flat out fake school. Essentially a football arm of like the mixture of a church and some guys getting together, and they tried to kind of make it like the IMG Academy of the Midwest. IMG Academy is a sports school down in Florida where like they give you education, but the main point of going there is to be a professional athlete. If you're going there on scholarship, it's because people think you are going there to be the next greatest thing ever. And if you're going there not on scholarship, your parents are rich and it doesn't really matter anyways. It's a really interesting documentary. I was wondering if I could even bring it up to talk on the show, and then I saw that there's a local connection. The year before they blew up and got, on ESPN and got spanked heavily, they had a player, number 3, Josh Bogan, who graduated in 2019 from South Lake High School in St. Clair Shores, which lets you realize he graduated in 2019 and he was playing in 2021 at a prep level. So it's a very interesting story, and if you have not watched it, I think you should. If Jer will let me, we will definitely talk about it at a later date.
Oh, of course.
There's some funny moments, but it's kind of heartbreaking at times. But I think it's very important to talk about because people should know that this can happen if their kids play sports, how to make sure this does not happen to your child.
Honestly, it'd be kind of great to find Josh, wouldn't it?
He's from here. I don't know if he's still here. I saw he had a Twitter page, but it's very much defunct. I'm sure once the stuff came out, he's like, nope, no more mentions for me. I would love to talk to him if we can try to do our best to, put on our snooping hats and find him and try to have a few moments of a conversation.
Well, and a little bit of homework for listeners, too. And if you've seen it or if you're going to see it, give me an email, dailydetroit@gmail.com. I think this is a good conversation to have to talk a little bit about what happens with this documentary. And I'm going to check it out this week. I want listeners to check it out, and then we can all talk about it next week. If you do see it, as I said, send me an email. All right, let's get into some of the stories because the Detroit Lions preseason is done. I think we need to talk about it overall as we head into that first game against the Chiefs. I think I'll start here, Fletcher. I generally feel positive about this team, and I feel positive of how we're going to do in the NFC North. I will start there and say, optimist take, I feel pretty good.
Well, the Lions ticked me off. They signed a former U of D Jesuit Cubs standout, played with Cassius Winston on the championship basketball team, was a great football player, quarterback and safety, and Scott Nelson. He ended up going to Wisconsin, playing there, was a solid stud, couldn't really find a team in the NFL. They signed him for their preseason squad. I got really excited, woke up to the final cuts, and he was one of the last cuts, which I understand, but still, I'm very annoyed to watch U of D Jesuit alums get done dirty because Scott's a great guy, and he's going to find somewhere, and he's going to come back and bust some people up. But on to a more serious note, although that is a little serious, I think the Lions could do well this year. I know everyone's talking about, all the hype they have come out of last year. I understand that very much. So instead of them being kind of the unknown, they have a target on their back. So we'll get to see how they're going to look as like the next up and coming team, which kind of I mean, obviously it's kind of the same as last year, but it's very different because expectations are different. You guys squeezing out 7, 8, 9 wins last year, that works. Do that again this year, like people will show up with pitchforks. Like that is not acceptable to have the same win total as last year unless you're making the playoffs.
What do you think is the fan expectation for wins, and what is your expectation for wins?
I think they're going to probably end up around the same, honestly. I think fans are expecting 11, 12 and a division title. I don't see a division title. I think they have a really good chance because the Packers are done. The Bears are still retooling. And the Vikings, while they are division champions, are such a weird team. Like, they're one of those teams where on paper they should be good. Then you watch them play and you're like, I don't know, this team won 12 or 13 games last year. But they did. So you have to give them credit for that. But, like, I don't understand how, because their makeup is just really, really strange. I think it's just get the ball to Justin Jefferson and get out of the way, which is a good thing to do because he's a really great receiver. But yeah, I'm expecting kind of the same, probably like 8, 9 wins, maybe scrapping into the playoffs, probably not succeeding there, but at least getting there is kind of like it's a good step to have for a young team because, you know, you got to build blocks and then go from there. You can't just expect to like add a few young players and all of a sudden become like Super Bowl champions. You need to like grow into it. If it happens where they become Super Bowl champions, I'll happily eat these words. I think with youth, you kind of got to take your lumps a bit quicker than the Pistons are doing with theirs. But like, I think the next year, if you have your Detroit Lions 2023, 2024 Super Bowl champion tattoo, you might want to get it fixed for next year just to be safe. Because I don't think that's going to happen this year, but it could. It could. They have a lot of potential. People love potential. But after having potential for a year, especially in this sport, next year is not potential. Next year is doing something with it. If you keep the same, then potential is gone and middle fingers are up. So you really want to hope that Ford Field is full of applause and not boos because it's really, really good for sound. So those boos echo for quite some time.
Yeah, I personally am going to go for division title. I think it's totally possible. I think that the rest of the division's kind of weak, and I think the team's on the upswing. I want to see the momentum carry through the preseason. I don't really care about winning or losing preseason games at all, but I think I see some good things there. One thing to mention, I think Teddy Bridgewater is going to be in that backup spot, especially after that injury. I mean, I think he's doing all right. Is he setting the world on fire? No, but if he were setting the world on fire, he'd be the top quarterback.
I mean, yeah, I love Teddy Bridgewater. Like, I want to put that on the record. Teddy Bridgewater is one of my favorite college players ever. He was amazing at Louisville. Did not have all the tools needed to succeed there. But they do something great with their mobile quarterbacks, Teddy Bridgewater, Lamar Jackson, people who like have a few receivers, not the greatest offensive line, but they go out there and put monster numbers up. And I have to only respect that. I know he's shaking off some rust. Like, I'm going to give him some time. I know his first game against Jacksonville was bad. Was not good. His last game he did a little bit better. I mean, 13 of 22 for 178 yards and a touchdown, which is okay. Again, it's preseason. You don't really care about the results so much when it's like backups against backups. That's just more about depth. You really care about the starters or like maybe the first off the bench backups versus, you know, whoever. But 178 yards in 2023 is like really bad passing. Like Terry Bradshaw would do that in a game back when he played, and it would be like, oh my God, look at this offensive maestro. You do that now, and they're like, is your arm broken? Like, are you okay? If Teddy is your backup in his current role, that's great. That's awesome. He's a really well-respected vet around the league, really calm and offers a good presence off the bench. If he's your starter, if Goff goes down, it could be great. It could be terrible. Teddy Bridgewater is full of great talent, but again, like I said, with potential, and like you said, if he had all that talent and consistency more often, he would not be the backup on this team. He would be a starter somewhere else because he has that in him, and unfortunately, he's not shown it all of it, which is why he ended up in the Lions bench. I love Teddy. I think he could be great as long as Goff is healthy and we see Teddy with a baseball hat and a clipboard. I'm okay with it. If he has to go in a bit more, hopefully the rust is gone and he's able to, you know, compete to the best of his ability. If not, then, you know, maybe it's going to be less than 8 or 9 wins I have expected.
See, I think he's going to get some play because you end up getting dinged up in this league, especially with how many games there are. Yeah, another bright spot I saw, rookie cornerback Stephen Gilmore. I think he did a good job last night. I like seeing new faces get into the end zone.
Yeah, for sure. He was great. He had a pick 6, which helps. The Lions secondary was one of the not great from last year. They had a really great defense in the middle, but their secondary was not awesome. So, I mean, he's from Marshall, not small, but you know what I mean, in terms of like, Alabama, Michigan State, Ohio State, smaller. But he's got a pretty good football pedigree. He's got family in the league. Stephon Gilmore of the Cowboys, who's a stud. I think he can help. I don't know if we should be counting on him the entire time. He is a rookie.
Oh, no. I'm just looking for bright spots.
He looked good. Brian Branch looked good. It's good to bring in some youthful players back there who can fly around and make plays, which will make the pressure the defensive line's putting on. It'll make them appreciate it a bit more because, you put pressure on the QB and he throws a ball up and it ends up falling in the receiver's hands. It's got to just tick you off because you're out there trying your best and your DBs are just leaving you out to dry. So if you got some people who can actually play in the back end, when that ball is just thrown up, hopefully they're not getting hit, making plays on the ball, it really helps. Hopefully he can continue this his last few games in the preseason and take it into the regular season and be a regular contributor.
100%. All right, I got some flack for this one, Fletcher Sharpe. We did not do a special emergency pod with this news. And basically, if you did not know, if you're listening out there, Trevor James is going to be changing roles after the season. He is leaving as head coach, but he will become the club's first ever sporting director. So really an oversight position, one that he's going to be able to focus on strategy, do different things. There's a few different things at play here, whether it's what's happening on the field with the club, the fact that Trevor is now in his mid-60s. There's a little bit of time left on his contract. I think it's an interesting move. I want to address first the fans and like the 50 messages of not doing an emergency pod. Fletcher, why did you not want to do an emergency pod?
Simply because he's not leaving at the end of the week. He's leaving at the end of the year. Like, we can talk about it later. They're in the hunt for a playoff race, which is a little bit more important. It's definitely important news, but it's not going to affect anything that's happening at the end of the year. Like, if him leaving at the end of the year meant that the next game they'd score 20 goals, all right, we will talk about it then. But in my opinion, it didn't, because he's still the manager until the end of the season, which might end against Pittsburgh at home, might end in a playoff game. Who knows? So until it's on the precipice of, actually happening, I think we should probably focus on the now. I understand why a lot of people were, like, what's happening? Because a lot of people have been calling for some change in that department, especially because DCFC is on pace to score the least amount of goals in a USL championship season from a team that's not an MLS affiliate. So for those wondering, a lot of the teams back in the old USL championship days used to have an MLS parent club or an MLS affiliated club where they maybe share a jersey, share a few players, or they just be outright owned by an MLS club. The small amount of goals that Detroit has so far was the Harrisburg City Islanders in 2017 when they scored 28 goals in 32 games. Detroit currently has 21 goals with 8 games to go at a goal rate of 0.81 goals a game, which would put them right at 28. Probably I'd have them be worse than Harrisburg, though, because Detroit would be playing 34 games. So you play more games, score the same amount of goals. That's a much lower clip. You're much less efficient offensively. And that's really worrisome. That's not good. That's a very bad clip. And honestly, if you factor in what happened last year, taking away the goals from MLS 2 teams from last year, they might be around that mark again this year. And if you factor in last year, they scored 44 goals. But if you take away, I think, the 18 or so goals that they had against MLS 2 teams, yeah, they're in the same boat, offensively challenged, which it's really not great when you look at the playoff standings and every other team has scored about 30 goals, save for Louisville, who are having a crisis up top with their forwards, but still found a way to almost hit 30. And meanwhile, DCFC is yeah. Even the commentator from last night's game, when after the final goal from Ben Morris, the own goal, was it's been a while since they've scored 3 goals in a game, huh? And I'm you're getting fried on national TV. And he's also correct.
Yeah, but on the other side, I'm going to say this. Birmingham lost, giving up 3 goals to the worst offense in the league. So what does that say about Birmingham?
That was going to be my comeback. He's yeah, you're right. You're frying Detroit's offense, but your team gave up 3 goals to this ineffective offense. What does it say about your defense, man?
It's like they rolled out a set of trash cans in the backfield. It was just not a good show in that regard. I'm really glad to get the win. Let's keep focused on this conversation, though. I am glad to see this move. I have thought there needs to be a coaching change for a while, which is an unpopular opinion. I think Trevor is brilliant. I'm not saying Trevor James isn't a brilliant guy. I think this is a better use of his talents. I think that we need more offensive dynamism. I think that looking at the numbers you're just talking about, like imagine, and I know we can't predict everything, and there's a million factors and blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, this team scores what Louisville scores. Like in my mind, we're getting a home playoff spot. We score an average number of goals mixed with a decent defense that we have, mixed with the talent of Nate Steinwasser. In my mind, we're hosting a home playoff game. And so I feel like, to me, that's a huge gap and something needs to change. And that hasn't changed in 2 seasons. I want to see that change. I want to see offense. Fans want to see offense. The vibe is great at Keyworth. I want the scoring to match with it too.
Not to be a numbers nerd, but the average goals scored by an Eastern Conference team this season is 33.5. So, like, Detroit is well underneath the average. If they even were, like, at 30, 31, maybe even 27, 28, like, of course, again, like you said, it'd be altering some time. Maybe Dario Suarez's bicycle kick at the end goes in. Maybe a few more goals that should have gone in from Ben Moore's earlier go in, and they have a few more goals. It might affect the record a little bit, but also just the offense would be a bit more dynamic. Like, you could have people, maybe not talking about how your offense is still one of the worst in league history, and actually it being factually correct. That's like probably the most indefensible part, is like, yeah, you're trying to make jokes, but also these are correct. And if I was a fan, this would kind of hurt a little bit. But yeah, they hopefully this is kind of a jump start for them. I know early on we were concerned because Nate was facing an inhuman amount of shots for his net, and he was on pace to, set a few records for shot stopping. And now that pace is definitely tapered off because they've been able to apply some defensive pressure to allow him to not have to play superhuman every single week. Because you don't really win games when you make your keeper make as many saves as he had to make early on in the year. I think it's good as well. I'm never one to call for a coach's job. I'm not going to do that. But I do think that it was time to make a bit of a change, especially if you are trying to attract maybe some more sponsors to come watch and do things with your club, for them to show up and then watch your club scrap out a 1-0 win potentially over another team that can't score. That's not great. DCFC played one of the most boring games I've ever watched of soccer, period, this year when they played against Miami, and I think they put together a total of like 3 shots on target. I actually almost fell asleep watching that match on television because it just for a minute there was a moment where just no one took a shot or passed the ball forward. It was just passing side to side, and the other team just standing there and be like, all right, what's going to happen next? That's a very bad thing, and I understand that, yes, 0-0 tie is still 1 point. When your fans travel and are falling asleep in the stands because you're out there playing some weird Simpsons-esque type style of soccer, maybe it's time you modernize your game a bit. And I'm not saying, come in there and try to moneyball your way into it, but like come in there, maybe shake some stuff up, maybe try to get a few players who might be outside of the pocket, maybe switch up the formation with what you have. But yeah, like you said, I think this promotion's a better job for Trevor just because it allows him to use his connections with other teams and other players and other coaches to try to like get people in there and help revitalize the team in a different way instead of using a somewhat archaic style of play.
And he needs to be out there doing that work. When you're in the middle of that season doing that grind, he needs to be able to go to England for 2 weeks or whatever and do, you know what I mean? Like, he can't do that as head coach. You're sitting there, you've got the daily grind. I understand, like, for multiple reasons why the idea of merging it was together, but I think it's much better if he's out there doing that work and using that Rolodex and a term that I think some of our younger listeners may not remember, but like being out there and just being involved in it in that kind of way. This club deserves that kind of thing. Pro clubs have that kind of people. I don't think it's anything personal against Trevor. I think it was, for me, it's not at all. I think he still is a brilliant soccer mind. I think this is a better utilization of his skills, and I think the club is better off for it.
Honestly, you can, as a coach, go away for a few weeks or a week or so on a scouting trip. You probably shouldn't, but you can. But you definitely can't if you don't trust your assistants to handle for you. So the fact that he's been like, I'm staying here for sure, shows that maybe he is like, these guys can handle managing a game when I am right here, but when I am gone, I don't like that. So maybe bringing in someone who has a bit less of a patchwork staff, and that's no disrespect to the staff on DCFC's squad. They've been really solid so far the past few years. But like maybe someone who comes in with their own people as opposed to people who are just around, maybe that is something where someone can go do something else, have someone else step up. Maybe he brings in his own scout to go along with Trevor, so you have multiple minds doing things. I'm not really sure what the shakeup entails. I do know that he will have a choice in who is his successor.
Is there anybody that comes to mind off the top?
I mean, honestly, if you want to, shoot for the stars, you could say Landon Donovan as the U.S. men's national team star and former coach of San Diego Loyal.
That's such a sad story.
Is folding since the MLS team for San Diego is coming to town. Or if you want to go for the local angle, you can go for their head coach, Nate Miller, who has a big history of playing and coaching in Lansing for Lansing Ignite and Lansing United. So he'll be available because their team's going nowhere. They're not absorbing into the MLS. If they do, great for Nate. But if they don't, I would be looking at him for sure. A big thing for me is a player-coach relationship, and Nate has a great relationship with all of his players. All of his players have glowing things to say about him. Even when they disagree, they're still like, Nate is whatever. And not to say people don't feel the same way about Trevor, but you and I have literally seen players like have a negative reaction to Trevor and like not talk things out until the following day. That has not happened with Nate Miller while I've watched them coach at all. So if I'm looking at somebody, he'd be a good pick. He's a smart guy. He knows his schemes. He'll bring over a few players, and they'll be really helpful.
If you don't know the San Diego Loyal story, and I'm not going to get into it heavily here, but it's just an example of when MLS comes to town, when Major League Soccer comes to town, it kind of like eats everything because so much of the energy gets sucked up. And so what's happening is that Major League Soccer is expanding to San Diego in response because they couldn't find a field and make the numbers work. San Diego Loyal is folding. And I tweeted about this because I think a lot of listeners, I will say this, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding from listeners. They think that like DCFC or other soccer players make like the same money you do as a Tiger. And I'm just going to say our star goalkeeper works a day job as an accountant.
And he makes more money as an accountant.
Yeah. So understand that if you want local things to succeed, you need to support them, right? Otherwise, like every dollar really matters with a club like DCFC or anything that's locally produced, especially, in the US, so much is nationalized now. I don't care if it's soccer. I don't care what it is, media, everything. It's so nationalized that if you want local stuff, you need to support it because it really matters, because otherwise it will not continue to exist. So I just want to put that plug in there. Go look up the San Diego Loyal story. Very heart-wrenching video from their owner who threw everything he could into that club and is just going to be just overwhelmed. And I get it. Like a lot of people want MLS, and I understand that. I'm not going to argue with people about their feelings, but it's just something to know that if you want local stuff to succeed, you got to support it.
And I guess if people don't want to go look up the story, the best way I can explain it is using a Marvel analogy. Just imagine that San Diego Loyal are the Avengers, and the MLS team coming is Thanos when he does his little snap. That happens, the team doesn't exist anymore. Those players don't exist anymore. They exist in their own separate things, but as an entity, they are gone. And the reason why it's somewhat evergreen here is if the MLS team comes to Detroit, I'm sure people will be happy. If they snap their fingers or they don't want to collaborate, Detroit City FC will probably have to fold, and their players, who everyone's grown to love, will probably be jobless. And I'm sure some people don't care about that, but like me, the coaching staff and the players and the medical staff, they don't deserve that. That's super unfair and a super awful way to go out, especially, without the grace of, maybe trying to offer something to work with people. That's the part that people tend to just kind of look over because they're like, I got a new shiny thing. Yeah, well, now 50 people here are now jobless. And some of them, this is like their last chance at a job. Some of them might have to just retire if that's the case. And I know some people, again, don't care about that part, but that's the part that makes me really, really sad.
So let's finally get into the match for Detroit City between Birmingham and Le Rouge and look a little ahead to Memphis really quick. Look, I'm glad for the win. It's some sort of weird thing that we keep beating Birmingham. I feel bad for the USL show's Kaylor Hodges because he definitely is like a Birmingham super fan, and he's just left holding his hands out there. I feel bad for him.
Yeah, it was in a really ugly game. Ugly game. First goal scored by Birmingham was a very obvious dive by their talisman, Enzo Martinez. Nico Brett steps up, scores a goal for his 75th in league history, which is an amazing thing. Congrats to him. Right after that, Ben Morris decides to go supernova, comes down, scores a goal off a Reese Williams cross, Soon after, another penalty kick is awarded, this time for what is actually a foul. Michael Bryant leaves his foot in someone in the box, and Debo Ngigwe sees that, hits his leg, and falls over, which might have been a little soft, but that's textbook foul. They score another penalty kick. They get up 2-1. Immediately right after, Ben Morris intercepts a pass, and then almost like Dario Suarez, except not quite, from almost at the halfway line, beats the keeper and scores, which is great for Detroit, but it frustrates me so much because keepers should just stay in the box, and then this won't happen. The same thing I said with Dario Suarez's goal. It's a great goal for your team that you support, but like aesthetically and like stylistically, it's a terrible goal because you should not be out of your box when your team is playing with the ball in your half of the field. You just shouldn't. It's akin to like watching hockey, and the hockey goal is like, oh, cool, you guys are skating around in our half. Let me go stand out of the blue area real quick. Why would you do that? What is the purpose of that? Except just to like, I don't even know. Like, you think you're assisting the offense, and you're not, because all you're doing is putting more stress on your defense to like not make a bad pass. Because they do, what's going to happen is someone's going to step in and then score a goal from long away, and you're going to be on an ESPN highlight. And then to even hammer home that point even further, soon after that, on the ensuing kickoff, Birmingham lost the ball. Detroit came down with Ben Morris, who decided he wanted to become the best English soccer player in the U.S. for the week. Came down, scored an own goal that deflected in off one of their defenders, and the rest of the game was just neutralizing Birmingham, which sounds like, oh, they've beaten them 4 times in 4 games, but Birmingham is one of the top teams in the league consistently. They have Enzo Martinez, who is a stud. He's a Uruguayan Messi some nights, but against Detroit, he looks like just some white dude with a really bad beard. Every game they've played, and I've watched him play against Tampa Bay and Louisville and all these other clubs, and he looks amazing. And against Detroit, he looks average. I mean, heck, this weekend, a 19-year-old, 18-year-old had him in his back pocket in Dom Gasso. Like, that's insane. I've looked at all the people saying, here's why they lost and here's why they won. And I looked at all the things, and I understand why, like, the words make sense, but watching it does not make sense. And, like, it's so strange to see a team that's so well-equipped and so deep to play against some of the heavyweights in the league, play against Detroit and just struggle 4 times in a row. Whether it's Detroit's streaking, whether Detroit's slumping, whether Birmingham is doing well, whether Birmingham is kind of they play and Detroit wins. If it comes down to like an asteroid's going to hit the Earth, unless Detroit beats Birmingham Legion, yeah, we'll be fine. we'll be okay, because that's just going to happen somehow. It's going to be like the 5 or 4 or 2 worst goals you've ever seen get scored. Like the goal Detroit scored, that was a goal of the year for them last year. Nate Steinwasser kicked the ball up deep. It fell to Declan Wynn, who crossed it in, to Antoine Hopino, who tapped it in. The ball did not touch the ground at all. It was literally just keeper kicks it up deep, falls to someone who deflects it into the box. Someone's going to tap it in. Again, for your team, it's a great goal to watch. You'll watch it again and again and again. From a soccer standpoint, it's a terrible goal to give up. That should not happen. That should not happen in a professional league at all. And just, I don't understand. Maybe they just underestimate Detroit every single time. Maybe they just are like, we feel bad for them, we'll just give them a win. I don't know what it is, but like every time they play, Detroit does the same exact stuff, and Birmingham's just like, oh man, what do we do? Did we forget how to play soccer? And then they just lose.
I will take the wins. I don't care. I'll take the wins. I'm glad to see Ben Morris go. I'm really glad to see, go and get some goals. Here's the thing that I enjoyed the most was to see the counterpunch after the other goals. Like, that to me matters. I was really getting a little bit in the sad place when that first goal was scored, because traditionally, you really want Detroit City to score first, but that counterpunch made me feel a lot better, and it made me feel better about the offense in general to see that happen. I understand all you're saying about Birmingham. I will take the W.
Oh, definitely. I mean, when you're fighting for playoff spots, you could win with like 7 own goals. Does not matter. The win's the win. And honestly, to your point about the counterpunch, not to belabor the point, but like it shows that like they listen to Daily Detroit, number one. They heard me saying they're not going to make the playoffs.
Are you just trolling them to get them in?
It shows they very much are like, we're not giving up on the season. Like, we can still make the playoffs. We want to make the playoffs. And like, if you're a fan, that's a great thing to see. It shows your team is not tucking in their tail and saying, all right, well, season's over. Let's just go out there and have some. No, they were like, we want to make some noise in the postseason. And like, even with 21 goals scored in 26 games, which is terrible. It shows that like they very much would like to get a chance to score some more goals that matter. Again, if you're a fan, that means so much to you. That should mean so much to you. So hopefully for their sake, they can keep it going. I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs. I have them with 2 wins, 3 ties, and 3 losses, which is 9 points. 9 points could get you in the playoffs and keep you in the same spot. 9 points could also sink you and have you not make the playoffs. I see them tying against Memphis, even though Memphis has kind of been a bit of a free fall. They lost their starting keeper, who just left the team. They have a young keeper behind him in Drew Romig, but they still have some pretty good pieces there in the midfield and their attack. And I get a little weird about Detroit when they go up against people who have 1 or 2 great attacking players, because they tend to like forget that those 2 attacking players are like really, really good and leave them wide open to do their business. Here's to hoping that I'm wrong. If you're a fan, I see a 1-1 draw when DCFC welcomes Memphis again to the friendly confines of Hamtramck. Who knows, man, at this point, because I mean, if they come out the way they came out against Birmingham, I'll be wrong. If they come out the way they normally come out, I'll definitely be right.
I want to see a win against Memphis. I want to see at least 1 point. It would be great to see a win because that's in my tie category too. But a couple of wins that are not expected would really kind of shift this thing around. I don't know what's going on. Dario Suarez didn't dress, and that's a concern point for me going forward. I just hope that he comes back for Memphis, you know?
Yeah, he's not feeling so well. We'll do our best to get a report in for what exactly it is. But yeah, he's not doing so great. So him not being there, I mean, Maxey didn't play last night, which
no, he
just
didn't.
To show you how weird it was. Maxey didn't play. He was on the bench. Dario did not play. Brett Levis, who had made some inroads, did not play. Dom Gasso started for a minute, ended up coming off for Adrian Billhart, who just has been getting so few minutes. So to put him in when it's late to try to seal the game off lets you know, like, you know, they're just throwing stuff at the wall and I'm hoping that sticks a bit. And this last weekend, it definitely stuck. So here's to hoping for their sake that it keeps sticking and they find themselves, you know, in the 6 to 8 spot in the playoffs.
All right, if you've got your thoughts, dailydetroit@gmail.com for the email, or leave a voicemail, 313-789-3211. That's 313-789-3211. Fletcher Sharpe on sports, a.k.a. Fletcher Nostradamus. So good to talk to you.
Sports are fun. So, yeah, I'm glad to be able to talk about something that's, you know, enjoyable and also frustrating at the same time.
With that, I am Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening to your Daily Detroit. Remember that you are somebody. We'll see you around town.